people just a minute.
Hello, everyone. We're going to give everyone a minute to get logged into their Zoom, join this webinar, and then we are so excited to start with you all.
Thanks everybody for hanging out with us. While you're getting situated and while we give people a few minutes to join, will you use that chat for me? Let me know where you're from. Like, I just want to know where people are or where home is. I see a Dallas, Hallie, I believe. Thanks for getting us started. Melanie is in Utah. That's great. Another Lehigh, Aaron. That's a familiar name. Glad you're hanging out with us. This is good. This is good. Sandy, Oregon, Iowa. All right, awesome. We got a good group here. Thanks for getting that warmed up. And then, all right, as long as you're participating this morning, and that's what I like, this is my kind of audience so far, will you let me know? I'm in charge of marketing, so I care about marketing stuff. Will you let me know if you're like a customer of Motivosity, or if you're talking to one of our account executives? Like, how did you hear about Motivosity, and are you already working with us, or what's your status there? All right, I see Summer's a customer, Cassidy's a customer. We've been loving it. Melanie's talked to Carly. Good. Customer since January. Awesome. Good. We have lots of customers in here. This is great. This is great. I have Tony has an appointment lined up. That's wonderful.
Awesome.
Logan's a first timer.
Great.
Nice.
All right.
Oh, Sarah, Tiny Bros is a customer. I had dinner with I think with Kelly from your team in Indiana a year ago. So,
I like the not a customer yet. You're speaking our language. All right. Well, thanks everyone for joining on that chat. I hope it continues throughout the webinar. Feel free to chat in throughout. I'll help with the chat as Logan's going, and he'll jump in there as well. If you do have any questions that pop up during the webinar, please put them in the Q&A section. We'd love to go over those after the presentation. So I will start us off though and introduce Logan here. So Logan is the Vice President of Marketing at Motivosity. And Motivosity is a company that helps make people happier at work. So why did Logan choose to join Motivosity? Logan was a customer before an employee and knew the product makes company cultures better right out of the box. Not to mention the Thanks Matters t-shirts, which we all know and love, especially if you're a customer. Hopefully you have one of those. He has held marketing leadership roles at LogMeIn, Jive Communications, and Workfront. And it's his marketing dream to have one of his campaigns include a blimp. Logan is a BYU alumni and an adjunct professor at the Marriott School of Business and has ties to Michigan, Texas, Washington, and Utah. His wife, 4 kids, and poodle are all of his favorites. And I can attest Logan is great to work with. I'm so excited for this presentation. You guys are in for a treat. And with that, Logan, take it away.
Thanks, Carly. Appreciate you. And again, it's really nice to hang out. We've got a good sized audience here today. In the chat, we clearly had a lot of customers. We're thrilled you're here with us, and a lot of prospects and people that we've had conversations with, and just friends from around. I saw someone say, we're not working with Motivosity, but you guys are all over Central Utah, SHRM, and we love being a part of those communities. We're going to have a great conversation today. I always start off my webinars with a story. And so let me tell you this story that a friend shared with me not too long ago. I have a friend, and when she finished college a number of years ago, she had a really great job offer right out of school, and a job offer most of us don't see. And she moved to California and bought a new home. And in buying that new home, she had an interior decorator come in and help her decorate this house. And so the decorator bought paintings and things for the tables and for the shelves. And she also put a number of plants throughout the house. This person lived in this house for a while. She had roommates, but eventually was moving. And when she was moving, she didn't want to take the plants with her because she was driving and didn't want the plants to die. And so she asked this roommate if they would take care of and water the plants for a while. And the roommate said, sure. And this friend of mine ended up going away and then coming back to get the rest of her stuff. And her roommate pulled her aside and said, "Hey, I need to talk to you about something." And she didn't really know what it was. And she said, "Do you know that some of your plants are plastic?" And it ends up that this friend didn't know that, right? Some were real and some were plastic. And she had been watering plastic plants for a really, really long time, and just found it out because of the roommate that had helped her water them. And so, what does that have to do with anything? Uh, it's really easy to be misaligned when any other human is involved, right? Anytime you have extra nodes or extra people that you have to have communication with, it's really easy to just be off, because communication can be difficult. I wanted to pull in some like funny examples of that same concept, and so of course I went to Twitter. This one says, "My toddler was about to hit her head on a bar at the playground, so I told her to duck. She quacked at me and then hit her head." Right. And so, just another example of how alignment and misalignment is really easy. 7-year-old says, "I'm done with my homework." And then someone asks, "You did it?" And the 7-year-old says, "That's not what I said." Right. Again, misalignment is so easy. This is my favorite. This one made me ugly cry because I was laughing so hard when I read it. But this is a text thread between two brothers. And one of them says, "Hey, I hate to ask you this, but could you spot me some cash?" And I'm assuming it's the older brother. The older brother responds and says, "What for and how much?" And I'm like $300 short on my Mott's applesauce payment due on the 15th. And the brother responds and says, "How much applesauce did you buy from them?" And it ends up, the text had auto-corrected, right? It was supposed to be mortgage payment, but it auto-corrected to Mott's applesauce. And I love that example because it just is a perfect visual of how easy it is to be misaligned with other people. And so, what drives problems at work? Like, what causes this misalignment? And I think there's an endless list of answers. A lot of us either have or do work for really massive organizations. There's different geographies and different buildings and different departments. Systems and processes create issues and problems at work. Um, right? Tools and the integrations or the lack thereof. I think we've all been victim of competing priorities, right? Maybe we have a dotted line to another executive, or you're trying to solve this problem and that one needs to be worked on, but they're competing. We interpret things differently. We have conflicting work styles. But maybe one of the biggest things that drives problems at work is just flat out fear, right? Maybe it's just people are afraid and they don't want to screw up, and they don't want to get things wrong, and they don't want to get in trouble. And so I actually, this slide really has nothing to do except that I Googled fear at work images, and I thought these were kind of funny. The guy under his desk, that feels like George Costanza from Seinfeld, and the person hiding under the lampshade. I just thought these were funny, and so I wanted to include them. But if people weren't afraid, what would they say? Like, what would they say? And we've got a good active group. We've got a decent sized group here. And also, you proved to me that you know how to use the chat. So let me ask you this, and jump into the chat, open that up. What do you think your people would say if they weren't afraid, if they had no fear at work? What are the things that they would talk about? Will you just drop that in the chat? And we've got a lot of smart people here. Let's learn from each other and see what we can do. So ideas, Brandy said ideas, fears of being laid off, ideas of how to grow, how things really are. Crystal says the truth. Right. Good. Thank you. I'm so grateful for your additions here. That's really powerful. This is a sad statistic to me. 85% of employees, according to Milliken and Morrison, Milliken and Morrison, 85% of employees feel unable to raise a concern with their bosses. That's essentially everyone, right? Like 85% is essentially everyone. And so that's a huge issue. If you want to see an even sadder stat, this one's really painful. DecisionWise says 34%. Literally a third of your team members are silent because they fear retribution from their managers. they're legit afraid of getting in trouble. Like they're not willing, to speak up because they don't want to be, they want retribution, they don't want to be looked down upon, they don't want to get in trouble. That's a horrible statistic. That's a horrible statistic. And so we have a real problem in front of us, whether you're a people leader, whether you're an executive, whether you're in HR and trying to create more effective people ops, like this is a problem. And so what we learn is that most employees just never speak up as a survival method at work. They would rather be silent than be wrong and criticized, right? And that's a really big issue. Now, I think you have this like loud minority that will speak up, and sometimes we over-index on their feedback. But that doesn't justify our actions here. Mari, you said, I'm just looking at the Slack quickly. What is the percentage of people that don't speak up because they don't think it will make a difference? And I don't know that number, but I'd imagine it's pretty high. We did this content with about 2,500 people a few weeks ago, and when I asked a similar question about like why don't people speak up, that was really common. It was just kind of this apathy of I don't think what I say is actually going to make an impact, and I think that's absolutely a reason as well. I think too many leaders, too many of us just assume no news is good news. I'm not hearing anything, so people must be okay, or no one's brought that up, so it must not be a problem. And this is not the right response, especially in 2023 when we're trying to retain our best talent. We're trying to figure out how to engage people. We have disconnected organizations because of remote work. I think that we have to realize that no news is good news is not a viable option. There's this concept I wanted to share with you called the iceberg of ignorance. The idea behind this theory is that the higher you are in an organization, right, the higher up the iceberg, the less that you truly know about what's really happening within your company. So let me give you an example. If you're an executive, you probably don't know that much about the day-to-day problems with the systems or the processes or the integrations or the tools, right? You probably don't know about some of the interpersonal drama that's going on or the frustrations that people have. And again, the higher you are in the organization, the more disconnected you are from the reality. I really loved this thought, this data, and I'm not familiar with Kathleen Allen besides this, and so I question it a little bit, but I love the concept that it teaches. What she argues is that essentially senior management executives are missing about 96% of the problems because they're hidden from them. People aren't bringing them up. Executives aren't paying attention to them. They don't really understand the technical details. And so that's a massive issue. Even if she's half right in her thoughts or in her data, that's a really big gap when it comes to what executives understand and what the frontline staff knows about the problems within the organization. Carly's going to bring up a poll in the chat, and I'd love your thoughts. Are there issues that you like? I'm asking you personally. Are there issues you avoid discussing with leaders out of fear? And keep going. We've got a decent sized group here. We're not massive, but let's get as many answers as we can. The answers that you can choose from are yes, I avoid things out of fear, no, and maybe once in a while. I'll give you just a second. Great participation. Thank you for doing that. Give you one more minute. All right, let's wrap that one up. And we'll see. It looks like we got about 86% participation, which is wonderful. Thank you. So 31%, a third of us just flat out say, yeah, there's things I avoid discussing out of fear. 22% say no, and I say good on you, good for you. And then the remaining 47%, about half, say maybe once in a while. So if you take those three data points, essentially 78% of this group says, yeah, occasionally, at least occasionally, there are things that I don't bring up out of fear. And I think that kind of gives us a pretty good perception of the problem. That gives us a pretty good reality of what people are up against. I am an adjunct professor, and so every once in a while I quote myself, which is really convenient when you're putting together webinars. The iceberg of ignorance stops leaders from finding and solving the real problems within an organization, which inhibits the growth of the company. But maybe worse is that it keeps employees stuck in bad circumstances, resulting in self-inflicted outcomes. And so let me say that in not such a adjunct professory way. When we're afraid to bring something up, it keeps people from knowing about it. And then we stay stuck in that same problem. The problem doesn't go away. And so not only are we keeping the organization from progressing and growing when we stay quiet or silent, we're keeping ourselves unhappy. And so I share that with you with the idea that if we want to change things, then we have to change what we're doing, including the fear that we might feel. And so let's talk about this today. And again, you shared some ideas. If employees could say anything to their executive teams, what would they talk about? And I saw a lot of things in that list: problems, ideas, the realities of what was going on. And I just wanted to share a small kind of word cloud to paint a little bit of a picture, right? And this is just a very small gathering of what we heard the last time we did this webinar. You might hear people talking about their managers or feedback, or they feel burnt out. They'd probably, in fact, Mindy just said, don't make us go back to the office and we have work from home up here, right? Like the idea of flexibility. Maybe they talk about things like IVF and in vitro fertilization as part of their benefits, or they talk about their 401k. Like there's a million things that people could and want to bring up. But we can't cover a million things in this webinar together. And so we're going to talk about three. And I have a really clear reason for why I pulled these three out. We're going to talk about loneliness. We're going to talk about psychological safety and trust, and we're going to talk about communication. And if you have ideas of other things that you want to hear about, put those in the chat or in the Q&A, because Motivosity does really good webinars and we do a lot of them. And so we're happy to put that on a list of ideas for next time. But let's talk about loneliness. When I started diving into research on this topic, I found some really interesting things. But before we do that, help me understand your work situations with another poll. Do you feel a sense of connection with your peers and teammates and coworkers? This is, again, you personally. When we did this last time, I saw some really sad answers. Some people jumped into the chat and they said, I've been encouraged not to have friends at work. And that was pretty painful for me. I thought that was a sad situation. Kim saying she loves who she works with. I'm glad to hear that. That's a win. All right, this is an easy poll, and these results are way better than last time. So I feel like we have a healthier group this time than we did in the last webinar. Congratulations on that. 88% of you said, yeah, I feel a sense of connection with my peers and teammates. There's 12% that didn't. And like, that makes work harder, right? And so thanks for sharing that. This is Dr. Vivek Murthy, and he is the current U.S. Surgeon General. And he, as a part of his administration, has come up with 6 priorities that he wants the United States to focus on. Now, I think when we think about the Surgeon General and Surgeon General warnings, we probably go to really heavy things like opioids. We probably think about tobacco and Surgeon General warnings on cigarette containers, right? But his 6 priorities are actually really fascinating. These are the 6 priorities on the .gov website. And he is wanting us he's wanting the public to focus on these 6 things. Now, look at number 1 and number 3. He's wanting people to focus on social connection and on workplace well-being, right? Think about how fascinating that is, that the government, and we could argue about government, we can go into politics, but that's a different webinar. But the lead health authority in our country is saying social connection and workplace well-being are two of the biggest priorities. Their data says 1 in 2 American adults report experiencing loneliness. Now, I will admit, I'm the world's biggest extrovert. I can talk to anyone about anything at any time, and I fall in this 50%, right? Like, my mental health puts me in this 50% where I experience loneliness despite being someone who's outgoing and engaging and able to engage. Um, Here are some really interesting data points, again, from the Surgeon General. They're talking about spikes in either spikes up or spikes down in people's mental and emotional health based on these data points. So social isolation in the last few years, and of course you can point to the pandemic, but it's still going. Social isolation has increased by 24 hours a month in the United States. Social engagement with others has decreased, and you can see that drop starting even before. And then social engagement with friends, so not just engagement with people, but with our friends, has dropped significantly. These are scary data points. Like, we're social creatures, and part of being happy and healthy at work is our social exposure. And so these data points drive part of the findings from the Surgeon General. They gave us some other statistics about the impact of that. What does lack of social exposure cause? Well, when we live in isolation, it reduces our chance of survival, right? Like, it literally increases the likelihood that we'll die earlier. Smaller social network size is associated with type 2 diabetes. The perception of isolation increases inflammation in the body. It's literally the same as being sedentary and not having physical activity. And people with strong social communities are 2.6 times more likely to report good or excellent health than those that feel alone. Bill said with a smiley face in the chat, he said, humans are pack animals. And it's true. We need each other. And what's really interesting is that the US Surgeon General is putting some of that on work. When he talks about creating healthy workplaces, this is their diagram, their visual that they've used. And look at the blue on the right-hand side. They talk about connection and community and belonging and social support. We're not going to spend a ton of time selling today, but this is a Motivosity webinar. Motivosity is built on the concept that we're happier at work when we have community and connection. And we didn't steal our words from the US Surgeon General. That's part of who we are. So in fact, if you're a Motivosity customer, maybe you'd do me a favor. Maybe you'd share 1 or 2 sentences in the chat about how Motivosity helps create connection and community. You have people on this call that are exploring Motivosity. They've talked with Carly or one of our account executives. Will you just help me either validate the impact that we've had and share 1 thought on how Motivosity has helped create community and connection in your environment? And I did see a request that we share these. We will, of course, share these with you. We'll make sure that you get them. Thanks everybody, Chris and Sierra and Eric for adding some thoughts. Harvard Business Review gave this statistic, and it's terrifying. It's terrifying. They say employee disconnection is one of the main drivers of voluntary turnover, with lonely employees costing US companies up to $406 billion a year. Think about the impact. So if your executives don't care about culture, or they don't think that loneliness or disconnection impacts them, Harvard Business Review is saying otherwise. This isn't Motivosity. This isn't my data. Harvard Business Review is saying $406 billion a year, because it's one of the biggest drivers of voluntary turnover. And that should be a problem. All right. Another poll. We love these polls because it helps us adjust our talk track and understand what you're experiencing. Does your company make an effort in creating a sense of connection between team members? I'm going to assume that's a yes from all of our Motivosity customers and friends of Motivosity. If you're using Motivosity, your company is making an effort. So your options are yes, they take time and resources, they kind of try, or they do nothing. I'll give you a second. Man, I appreciate this. Like, Sometimes when we have smaller webinars, it's a little quiet in the chat. Y'all are the best. This is fantastic. I'm going to get a drink. You finish up the poll. All right. I think we're there. This is great. This is good. 48% said yes, they take time and resources. Again, I assume a lot of that is our friends of Motivosity. 41% they said they kind of try, and that's good. Like, that's good news. I'm glad to hear that. 11% said they do nothing. That's probably a hard place to work. I imagine that makes some of the day-to-day a little bit trickier. This is young Logan. I'm not wearing a hat. I have more hair. I'm a little thinner and square jaw. I brought this picture, and these are my two of my best friends. This is John and Corey, and this is at my wedding. And I brought this picture in because I wanted to say that I don't expect work to provide my best friends, right? I don't expect my lifelong best friends to come from the office. What I do expect is to work with really great people that I enjoy and like, and that I can build meaningful relationships with. And so I think it's important that we set the right expectation. This isn't about creating everyone's permanent social network. This is about creating environments where they don't feel lonely, where they feel connected, and they enjoy working with people. And more often than not, that means it's not just focused on work. Right? Like, if we're just focused on work, then we're eliminating that social connection. This is off the talk track, and excuse me for maybe bragging a little bit. Motivosity just got back from what we called Movers Club. And we took our entire company and their spouses to Mexico for 3 days. And our CEO said something in that trip, and he said, connection and being connected is a powerful way to get work done. And he said, I'm convinced that that the experiences we share together will remove obstacles at work, and that we can create more efficiency in 3 days having great experiences together than in an entire year of meetings. And I really thought that was a powerful sentiment that changed my experience on the trip, and it changed how I think about social connection. And so I want to share that with you today. I'm going to move through this kind of fast. The U.S., again, the Surgeon General provides some ideas about how to create connection and community at work, right? And so they give us a few ideas. Social support is the idea of having networks and relationships that can offer psychological and physical help and mitigate the feelings of loneliness and isolation. Belonging, they talk about being an accepted member of a group, right? They talk about making social connection a strategic priority in the workplace at all levels. Training and empowering leaders and managers to implement programs that foster connection in the workplace, and educating the workforce about social connection. Now, again, I'm pulling this from page 61 of the Surgeon General's advisory documentation. So when you want to go talk about the importance of this at work, you can pull from this content that is backed by the government and very formal and very researched, and say, hey, this isn't just me. This isn't just HR, or this isn't just an individual manager wanting to make this better. This is a focus that can create a real impact. I think these two are great as well. Create a workplace culture that fosters belonging. Allow people to connect as a whole people, not just as skill sets. And then this last bullet point, I'm going to add my own clarity here. They say support employees in nurturing their relationships outside of work while respecting boundaries between work and non-work time, right? And so that's what I was talking about earlier. We can get more done in 3 days of experiences together than in a year's worth of meetings. What I would say is you're supporting employees in nurturing their relationships outside of work. You're not forcing employees to nurture their relationships outside of work. Those aren't the same. Empowering and requiring have two very different sentiments. If you're interested in more on this content, Motivosity writes about this all the time, and I like this blog post. If you just hold your camera up to that QR code, you can get to this article. It's called 17 Tips to Build a Community at Work. And whether you're a customer or a friend of Motivosity, then you'll find some value. You'll find some value in there. I'm going to shift and move to psychological safety and trust, and that concept of how focusing on this helps people feel empowered to speak up more often. This quote says, "Fear paralyzes us, but it also filters our behavior. We choose the safe path, not the right one." Psychological safety, which is the shared belief that a team is safe for interpersonal risk-taking, is essential to drive collaboration, decision-making, and innovation. I think that's a great quote. Again, we'll share this with you, but if you want to screenshot that, that's going to be a really great way to communicate this concept to your peers, to your manager, to your executive team. I asked people on LinkedIn, I did a little qualitative LinkedIn effort and said, what would you say if you felt psychologically safe? This person said, I would emphasize with the executive, with the C-suite, it would be about trust. Hire the right people and trust them to do the job you've hired them for. I have amazed even myself at what I've accomplished when I was given trust to excel and sometimes fail. This person said, build trust and capability among the team and then get out of the way. Create and foster a safe space for healthy conflict and not endorse or create a space for artificial harmony. I thought that was a really cool concept, the idea of artificial harmony. And there's something there. Maybe that'll be one of our next webinars. Harvard Business Review says the more we want to control our employees, the less they engage and share what's actually happening. There's an inverse relationship between control and feeling psychologically safe. And so what does that look like? What does that look like in an office? I am a Ted Lasso diehard fan. I can never have something without a Ted Lasso allusion in it. If you haven't seen it, Ted Lasso is a soccer coach. He's really happy-go-lucky, and he just teaches some great lessons to his players. And in one scene, Sam, the soccer player on the left, he screws up in a play, and he comes over to Coach Lasso to apologize. And Ted says, Sam, do you know what the happiest animal in the world is? And Sam kind of cocks his head and looks at him. He's a little confused. And Ted says, a goldfish. It's got a 10-second memory. And then he says, be a goldfish, Sam. And that's such a great concept, like this idea of being able to move on from problems and when people make mistakes, being able to work through and pass them. I shared this story before, and so apologies if you've heard it. Motivosity is located in Utah. And when I first started with the company, it was right after COVID, and I woke up one morning and one of my team members on the executive team said, I got a message from him in the morning, and he said, Logan, we've won Utah Business's Fast 50 Award, the fastest 50 growing companies in Utah. He said, we've won that 3 years in a row, and we're not on the list this year. And he said, what happened? And I have to admit, I just didn't know. I hadn't worked for a local Utah company like that before. I hadn't been responsible for the awards and this growth reward. And I just didn't know. Like, I just didn't apply. I literally missed the deadline. And so I brought my executive counterparts together and apologized. And I shared that with them. And they kind of looked at me for a second and they said, you know what? That's a shame, but oh well, big deal. On we go. And they said, we'll get it next year, which we did, by the way. But there was something about their freedom. They let me be a goldfish. I was psychologically safe. And so I turned to my marketing team. I pulled them together that day, and I said, all right, we're going to use this. Like, this is a little bit of a failure. We're going to leverage it. And so we brainstormed. We came up with some ideas. And what we ended up doing was we ended up launching a press release. And the press release said, Motivosity forgets to apply for Utah Business Fast 50 Award and doesn't win. And we took our last 3 awards and then we photoshopped the did not apply. And we literally put this out to the Associated Press. Like, we pushed this out to the news wire and got a lot of pickups on it. And I actually got, people reached out and they said, I never would have heard of you if you had won that award, but I've heard of you now. right? And so I just share this as an example of what psychological safety in the workplace can do. How do we create that? Let's see. I'm looking at the time. Yeah, we have time. Let's run this poll. Is yours an organization where people feel safe even if they've made a mistake at work? Are your people empowered to be a goldfish? Have you created a safe workspace? Most people probably feel safe. Or you in that everyone's terrified boat? I'll give you a second. I'm going to get a drink of water here. Yes, everyone. Bill, please do steal that "be a goldfish" quote. I think the more we can send that message out in the world, the better. Oh, that's amazing. Melanie said, we only care about who can fix it, not who broke it. I'm going to screenshot that right now before that goes away, because that's a power statement. And Melanie, we're going to steal that. Someone steal our "be a goldfish," we'll steal that one. All right, let's wrap this up. Now, look how interesting this is. We had this really group that felt really connected, but we're a little bit more in the middle on this one. Like 19% said, yes, we've created a safe workspace. 66, so literally 2/3, said most people probably feel safe. And that's good. That's a good place to be. 16% said everyone is terrified. So a little bit more of a traditional bell curve there than we've seen in some of the other polls. Appreciate that. Hopefully that's insightful for you as well. Nahar Chaya gave some really interesting thoughts on how to create a psychologically safe work environment. They said, shift your ratio of connection and correction. Executives who connect rather than correct remove fear in the workplace, replacing it with a meaningful dialogue that helps to co-create a shared definition of success. It doesn't take a long time to shift away from the correction habit. I think that's a really powerful idea, shifting connection and correction. They also said, show vulnerability. Leaders who create safe cultures welcome dissent from subordinates and concede power every once in a while in the service of increasing the team's commitment. But this takes vulnerability. Rhetorical question. Do not put this in the chat, and there is no poll. When was the last time that you just told your team you were wrong? When was the last time you said, man, I really blew it on this goal, or I really, I got disorganized and I screwed up here, or I thought this was going to work and it didn't. This was horrible. Those are power statements. Those are power statements, but maybe not in the way you think. Those are power statements where you're doing what Nahar said and conceding that power. And I think we need more of that. I'd argue that's a valuable asset or a valuable capability of powerful leaders. Consider whether you have ever, without a hint of frustration or defensiveness, allowed your employees to prove you're wrong. If you haven't, consider doing so. And don't worry about whether it will make you look weak. Instead, remember the pratfall effect. Generally competent people are deemed to be more appealing when they make a mistake. And research shows that likability is a requisite for being seen as a successful leader. So just some thoughts there for you. You're here on a Motivosity webinar. Motivosity, again, is built on a foundation of community and connection. One of the things that we do amazingly well is to help people be recognized for the work that they're doing. We did an interesting survey not too long ago. We surveyed 2,000 people, and 75% said that their mental health would improve if they were recognized at work more often. And I think this visual shows why that would have such an impact. When people feel appreciated, when they feel recognized and there's gratitude, it builds trust. Trust drives performance, and performance leads to better outcomes, right? And so gratitude creates this really powerful cycle that makes people better and drives better outcomes in the organization, which leads to more gratitude, leads to more opportunities for gratitude. And again, Motivosity does that really well because this is our thought process. Stephen Covey said, frequent and consistent recognition with an expression of gratitude that's immediately after a project comes from a peer or a manager, is tangible, unexpected, personal, and public, has the largest effect on organizational trust. Now, we of course didn't pay Stephen Covey to say this, but this is why Motivosity works, because this is what our business is built off of and what we help create for organizations. And hopefully our customers are seeing that. It looked like it. I saw some stats. I thought I saw an 86% participation and some other ones. Those were beautiful. So thanks again for sharing. I'm going to shift to my last kind of pillar topic here and talk about communication, right? Because it is such an important part of work, and people are afraid to communicate, and communication is one of the things they're afraid to communicate about. This stat says 86% of workforce respondents blame poor communication as the main reason for company failures. That's massive, right? Here's another interesting one. 7% of US workers feel that communication is accurate, open, and timely at work. 7% is almost 7%, super close to 0%. Like in the grand scheme of things, those are really close to each other. 74% of employees feel that they miss out on important company news and information because of bad communication. So that's an issue. And frankly, if I were to just summarize this with a meme, I would just say that's awful. Like, we are doing horribly in communicating as organizations. And so how do we melt that iceberg of ignorance? How do we melt again, you've got executives that aren't communicating. They don't even know what to communicate about necessarily. How do we melt that iceberg of ignorance and close that gap? Another way to say that is, how do we get attention and buy-in from the executives on topics employees are too afraid to address? Like, how do we change some of this? Again, we have 100 smart people here. If you have a thought, please speak up and put it in the chat. If you have an idea, like I'm an expert, but I'm not the expert. And so if you have thoughts you want to add, I hope you will, so we can learn from you as well. My first thought about how we change things, I don't know if you remember this cargo ship, I believe in the headed towards or in the Suez Canal. This cargo ship was trying to turn around and got stuck in the canal and basically stopped commerce in that part of the world for far too long. I use this image because this can be a really big ship to try to turn, right? And so I wouldn't leave a webinar and go expect to change things by 5 p.m. Eastern Standard Time. Like, know that this is a big ship. It will take a lot of time to turn and to shift, and be okay being patient, and small wins are okay when it comes to this. I'd recommend that a strong foundation comes from this concept. Rejecting bad news harms your organization more than your self-image. You are not the company. So think about this from an HR perspective. When people come and say, this is bad, this isn't working, I'm really unhappy with this, or when they give feedback to your executives, sometimes we take that really personally, but we are not the company. It's okay to feel pride and joy about your organization, but don't let your love and your passion ignore areas of improvement, right? I think if we can create a little disconnect between this is me and this is the organization, then we'll be more open to that feedback that people want to give. Intentionally and patiently starting to identify positivity bias in communication coming from your team members. Then be curious rather than judgmental in fixing it. There's another Ted Lasso reference for you super fans. What this is saying is that, and we all know this, sometimes we turn in a report that looks really good because we're afraid, or we only share the good news up, right? And so if we can start to not only change that ourselves, but carefully push our team members, and maybe that's a question. Carly's on this webinar. There's a effort that Carly and I are working on, and the numbers aren't great in this specific place. And we want them to be great. We want it to look good. But I think what we've had to do is kind of admit that it's not going as well as we expected. And we had to remove some of that positivity bias around this project. When we're curious rather than judgmental, we can eliminate positivity bias in the things that are coming up to us as people leaders. Excuse me. Executive resilience. I did some research and it ends up that in 2023, one of the things executives are most focused on, both for themselves and for their teams and the people that they're responsible for, is building resilience. This thought from Douglas Stone and Sheila Henn, the authors of Thanks for the Feedback, said, when we feel attacked, we shut down. We take feedback personally and we confuse the part with the whole. That's because we associate our self-identity and reputation with the organization's performance. If something is not working, we are to be blamed. I will fully admit, I have a huge problem with this. When something's not working, it is all on my shoulders and it's my fault and I am the one to fix it. And there's some value in that, but only to a point. And so helping executives, and often that's us, that's the people on this webinar, it's the people leader, it's the people that are responsible for training and management and learning development. If we can be more resilient, we'll be more powerful. Motivosity, and this is going to look new. If you're a Motivosity customer, you're not familiar with this view yet, but you will very, very soon. We're updating our survey capabilities, and we've created what's called the MV6. It's essentially 6 questions that that we ask your team members, because it does 2 things. One, it helps you understand sentiment and how your culture is working. And 2, it helps you get data to provide evidence that your efforts are working. And so this is part of the Motivosity platform. It is an add-on, and so some of you may or may not have it. We're upgrading these capabilities, and in just the next few weeks, we're going to have a really beautiful upgrade, both to the functionality and the visibility. But you're going to have an easier time understanding your team members and whether they feel like they're appreciated for their work. You're going to have an opportunity to understand better if they have a positive relationship with their manager, if they feel connected. These next 2 questions are so crucial. We ask your team members on a rolling 90 days, so you're always getting the data, whether or not they would take a similar job for 10% more money. So if you want to be able to understand whether or not you have a turnover risk and see if there's turnover risk in a certain department or team or geography, Motivosity's employee engagement or employee insights tool will be able to help you do that really well. And then the question that we use as our ENPS, our employee net promoter score question, is, do people tell their friends they should work there? And if not, then you've got a problem. And what this data helps you do is, again, show the evidence that your efforts within HR or people management are working, but more specifically, it gives you a place to go solve problems. So for example, in this question, I can say, great, where are my detractors in the organization? Are they in this facility? Are they in this team? Do they report to this manager? And it's anonymous, of course, and we keep it anonymous. But suddenly I can go say, where's the smoke in the organization that I can go prevent some fires? And if you're not using this already, if you're using this already, you'll automatically see these upgrades. If you're not, if you're interested in learning more, this is so affordable. I think people are crazy to not have it as part of their suite. At the end of the webinar, Carly will ask if you want to learn more, and you'll be able to say yes or no. But you're going to love these upgrades. All right. One other thing that you can do to focus on making people feel comfortable speaking up is to focus on moments that matter. Gartner said more HR leaders are now looking at moments that matter as a technique to help them better understand employees. 16% of HR functions are experimenting with a moments that matter approach, and 56% of HR leaders are interested in identifying moments that matter for their organization. All right, almost finished here, but help me in the chat one more time. When you hear the term moments that matter, what do you think about? What does that mean? When you think about moments that matter to your people, what are those moments, if you had to guess? I'd just love a little bit of your opinion and your thoughts. And I'm going to wait here in perfect silence until I see some. Krista, thanks for jumping in. Wins, an opportunity to connect, celebrating a win, a sense of fulfillment when people feel valued, vulnerable contributions, hearing good job. Yeah, great. This is solid. Um, Moments that matter. I think of those as the moments when your team members have two paths in front of them and they think, one path is, I am so glad I work here. I'm going to continue to invest and build my career here. Or they think, this place isn't for me and I'm going to quit. It's time for me to go find something new. Anytime they face that decision, it's a moment that matters. So when they're brought into the team or the company, that's a moment that matters. Do they feel connected? Do they understand the values? Do they feel excited? Do they get to see all the things happening in the organization? Um, do they have moments that matter with their boss? Like when they screw up, is it you screwed up and you're in trouble? Or is it, I don't care? Is it Melanie's quote of, I don't care who caused the problem. I want to figure out who can solve it. Are they getting meaningful coaching? Are they being recognized? It's things like that where they decide sticking around and I'm going to work hard and give my best, or I'm going to quit and either stay and be useless or leave. And that's the idea behind moments that matter. And again, that is what Motivosity does try to focus on. We know that there are those moments, and it's not about the payroll system. It's not about logging in and fixing your benefits. Like so often we look at tools, we buy these tools that are meant for corporate or meant for HR, and no one loves logging into their payroll system. And that's what Motivosity is for you non-customers. Motivosity is the place your team members want to log in because it is focused on those moments that matter. As I wrap up, here's what I would have if I could paint this perfect picture. I'm going to steal it from Michael Schneider. Michael Schneider said, imagine a different setting, a situation in which everyone is safe to take risks, voice their opinions, ask judgment-free questions, a culture where managers go first, provide air cover, and create safe zones so employees can let down their guard and speak up. That's the goal. I think that we should probably all print this off and put it on our computer backgrounds or take it to our next leadership meeting or train on this, whatever it is, pin it to our desks. This should be our goal, a situation where people feel safe to take risks, speak up, managers provide air cover and create safe zones so that employees can let down their guards and speak up. I think that's a powerful thought. I am really grateful to this group. You were awesome in the chat. You've got two different options here, two different QR codes, and you can take them both. My QR code leads to LinkedIn. It's a small world, and we need all the friends that we can get. And so if you want to connect on LinkedIn, please do. And if I can be a resource, if there's someone I can know, if I can help you make noise about a job opening or something, please reach out. The other one is just more information about Motivosity. A lot of you already have a customer success manager that will help you, or you're maybe already talking to someone. But if you want to learn more without being followed up with, you can go there. And then Carly put a poll up. If you want to learn more about our employee insights tool and upgrading your survey and your data capabilities, let us know. If you're already working with someone but want to make sure they follow up, you can put yes there. And we appreciate you. Regardless of whether you want follow-up, we are here if we can be a resource. So thank you very much. We'll leave that up for one more second. And then I think Carly, it looks like there's a couple of questions here that Carly has from throughout the webinar.
Hello, we're back, everyone. Logan, thank you so much. That was such a great presentation. And thank you again to all those in the chat. Yeah, it really does change the presentation in the webinar when we do get the audience involved. So thank you very much for that. There were a couple questions that popped up in the chat and within the Q&A, and one that came a couple different times, and this was really similar to Joan's question in the chat as well. But that question was, you talked about what to do to build a safe place, and it seems like a lot of it is how people lead. What if the problem is the leaders? And Joan's question was really similar, talking about what if like a leader doesn't like confrontation. And people in the chat had great responses, but Logan, we'd love to hear from you.
I missed the chat one, so or what the answers in the chat. So excuse me for missing that. And I might repeat a couple things. Here's my first answer. You might not solve it, right? Like that. I think sometimes we always expect there to be a solution. And sometimes the organization just simply will not allow it. Maybe it's a really old and established organization that hates change. Maybe it's an individual that just will not see it a different way. And so sometimes I think it's okay to just accept, like, maybe I can't fix that here. Doesn't mean you can't try, right? Doesn't mean that you can't make your sphere of influence better, but maybe you can't fix the whole organization. And sometimes you're going to face the choice where you're going to say, all right, I can't make the change I want. I'm going to leave, or I can make other changes, or I'm still learning, or I'm, really secure and safe here. And I'm just going to decide that, oh, well, that's something I can't change. Like, I have to acknowledge that that is a possibility. Hold on, I'm going to stop sharing my screen here so that I can see a little bit better. I guess the other thing that I would say is, how could you support that individual, right? Maybe you say, maybe it's something subtle and you say, I heard about this business coach that's really powerful, or Better Up. I heard about Better Up, and I think it would be cool if we invested in business coaches for the leadership team, right? And maybe getting a third party outside source is the right way to do that. Maybe you read a book and you bring that book up and say, man, this really impacted me. I'd love to read this as a leadership team. I read a book the other day. It's called Leading Without Authority. And it's the idea that you can have an impact and be a leader without a title, right? And I shared some thoughts from it with one of my team members. And then yesterday, I really felt like that was the message my team needed to hear. And so, kind of on a whim, I said to that team member, I said, hey, will you throw together a quick 15-minute training on that topic? And so sometimes just reading and sharing your ideas plants a seed. Maybe that's all you can do.
Definitely agree with all of that. And it was a great presentation because I was there for it. Okay, thank you so much for those thoughts. And we have just 3 more minutes, so we'll sneak in one more question. Oh, and just so everyone knows, before I forget to tell you, we will send you a recording of this webinar. Okay, last question. They said, I work for a big organization. I feel like our department does pretty good with open communication, but I hear horror stories in other departments. What can I do to help? It's similar to what you touched on, but anything else you want to add in?
Yeah, so here's something I think the whole world is bad at. I think we make statements and then we don't back them up. So in sales, what that looks like is they'll say, man, every call I'm on, they tell me no because of this, or I keep getting rejected because of that. And we make it sound really big. The most powerful, and I'm using sales because sometimes they're easy to pick on, but because it's relevant, the most powerful sales reps will say, Logan, I keep running into this problem, and here are 3 recordings or 3 customers where I can provide evidence of that. So instead of just saying it's a problem, they provide me with the evidence. And I am not trying to sell here, so whoever that was, but that's one of the reasons that we include that employee insights and survey capability in Motivosity, so that you can go gather the data and then go back to your executive counterparts and say, you know what, I kept hearing about this problem. And so I started doing some research, and here's the data, right? And then to be able to provide that and say, this is what our reality is. The other thing that I would do on top of that is I would gather not just the quantitative insights from a survey, I would gather some qualitative insights. I would go have 15-minute one-on-ones with influencers in the organization. They might not be the executives, they might not be the leaders, but people that have clout, right? Maybe it's just social clout, or they're the social butterflies. And I would just go to them and I would say, I'm trying to understand this, and if it's a problem or not. Can you give me 15 minutes worth of ideas? And then I'd pull out their quotes and I'd include that with the qualitative data.
Thank you so much. Yes, and obviously, we'd love to help there too. Okay, so we are at the top of the hour, but again, thank you so much for everyone who has been here, who has put in questions, who participated in the chat and the polls, and obviously a big thank you to Logan for this great presentation. And Logan normally says this, but I might still send her. But if we at Motivosity or Logan himself or myself can help you out in any way, please reach out. We will send a follow-up email again with that recording and follow up with some of these questions that we weren't able to get to. But we hope everyone has a fantastic Tuesday.
Thanks, team. Go get them.